In this episode, I am joined by Nicolai Thomson, co-founder and CEO of Jenesys, a company that's pioneering the use of AI in bookkeeping and cash flow management. With an impressive track record of selling B2B solutions across 3 continents and scaling companies from startup to multi-million pound revenue, Nicolai brings 2 decades of business wisdom to our conversation. Hey, hi Nicolai. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Hey, how you doing? Really great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Awesome. So another Antler alum, right?
Yeah. I was in UK.
UK 7, yeah. So I'm a UK as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about Jenesys and how you guys? We've never met, of course.
Yeah.
Before that, we had a call, but such a small world. Would love to know a little bit about Jenesys and how did you guys start and what do you do for your customers right now?
Yeah, thanks, man. So, Jenesys started because of a number of years of experience spending company money, both pre and post reconciliations. Because I did finance and accounting at university originally when I up in Edinburgh, I have always known enough about what goes on in a finance function. And for years, it's been an alarming similarity between both small companies, startups, and enterprises around basic things like when you need to spend company money, like if you are a cost center owner and your company pays by purchase order, you get an approval request to spend money. So in bigger companies, where there's a bit more structured, but you never actually know what the balance of your budget is when you're asked to approve spending company money. And then in a startup, you haven't got a clue what your budget is because you didn't set a budget, and you get asked on Slack or Teams by someone like, oh, I need to buy this, and you're like, sure, and it never actually gets that little bit of communication never actually gets structured so that the finance function can understand what money has been committed, because it has a huge knock-on effect on cash flow. Right. And when you see stats like 82% of companies that went bust in the US last year, they self-reported that the reason for going bust for 82% of them was cash flow. And so it's like some people just have an unprofitable business, and so in other words, cash flow will catch up with you. Right?
Yeah, of course.
But there are a lot of profitable businesses that are in there that went under because they cost up their cash flow. And their business owners and their accountants, at some point, they realize that they have a cash flow problem, but it was too late because bookkeeping takes so many weeks, sometimes months, to catch up or to keep up. And so the shock or the bill or the bills that were the cause of this cash flow issue, which have turned up now, happened weeks ago or months ago. And so it's a little bit like, for anyone in the UK who's been caught speeding on the motorway, you go to this speed awareness course. And one of the things that they explain to you in it is the phantom traffic jam, and why these gantries have got a change of speed limit on the motorway, which, every now and then catch you out. And the reason, even though there's not a traffic jam, yet the speed's changed to 40, is this phantom, this domino effect of like a long tail. So although an incident might have happened 10 miles up the road, they have to start slowing down the traffic 10 miles before to not create a massive traffic jam. And so if they didn't do anything about it, then all the traffic would just arrive at the traffic jam and there would be a nightmare, complete jam. And so when cash flow works in a similar way, where if you sort of wait until the moment where all the cash is going out, you might actually find that you don't have enough, despite the fact that you've got a profitable business. Because it's the timing of when the cash goes out. So it's the timing of when do you want all these cars hitting that incident. And so sometimes you just need to slow those cars down. And really effective cash flow management requires you to proactively manage and slow that down. So I'm really thrilled to just chat on this podcast about this, and appreciate having me on.
Thanks. And so when I read the pitch, the product, I felt that it was more for accountants. Is that the case?
Yeah, so it's ironic. If you look at our website, it doesn't talk about cash flow, doesn't talk about working capital, but the data which informs your cash flow position, or the data that needs to be used to be able to give you working capital to smooth out those cash flow shocks is based on bookkeeping data primarily. And so when your bookkeeping data is already a number of weeks out of date, it's kind of a bit pointless. In that same example with the traffic, it'll be like putting the slow down like 40 mile an hour signs where the actual like accident is, as opposed to 10 miles before. It's like, well, the cars didn't have a chance to slow down yet. So we need to, part of our job is to make bookkeeping real time, or as close to it as possible, so that we can get in front and know that there's a problem. And when I know that there's a problem, or there's a bill, there's an opportunity to grow, like for so many people, I have direct experience of companies that have not been able to trade with a bigger company because they would have to be able to provide inventory or services that their balance sheet just can't cope with. And so they can't get that contract, or they can't accept maybe there's a 90 or 120 day payment terms. It might be an incredibly sexy opportunity. It'll be game-changing for them, but if they're not going to get paid for 120 days, they might not have the margin to access the working capital that, for example, a SME typically can get their hands on. It might just be too expensive, which is pretty common. And so you try and negotiate payment terms, but the buyer always has the upper hand in those early negotiations. And so we've built Jenesys, and Jack is the name of our AI agent that is your bookkeeper, to sit at this interface between a business and their cash, because on either side of that is an accountant and a banker. And this data for bookkeeping is what is needed in real time to bring these two parties closer together. But the lack of real time, or the lack of consistently accurate, which is another problem in the industry, bookkeeping sort of pulls them apart. And there are a lot of big finance houses around the world with a lot of cash to deploy, but they can't deploy it into the SME sector. And we are utterly convinced that it's because they don't have access to the data which they tell us they need, and which we all know that they need, because bookkeeping takes weeks to complete sometimes. And it's largely, in the UK, it's largely based on a compliance calendar. It's like your VAT is only due every 3 months, and so most people only take their bookkeeping seriously every 3 months. And so like that data can't be used for a lending decision if you want to get high quality, like cheap lending. There's a lot of poor quality, expensive lending available, but that might just, imagine that annihilated the entire margin of your business. Like, would you still do it?
Yeah, no.
And so these two products are highly interlinked. Like, transforming bookkeeping is necessary. For why it's important to a business is very different to why it's important for an accounting practice who have hundreds of clients, or sometimes tens of clients that they serve. The practices, they're battling with... So here's a pretty common scenario. In order to grow, I need to hire people. Right? That's in order to grow your practice, you have to hire bookkeepers, you have to hire accountants to bring on that more work. And if I do that, then my margin in the short term goes down, because I've had to hire people first. And if I have a bad hire, or I have somebody leave, like, it creates pressure and stress on the rest of the team who pick up the slack. Which happens quite often, like especially if you're hiring new people. The probability that you're going to find at the first attempt the best bookkeeper you possibly can that fits into your business culturally, as well as like from an expertise point of view, the probability of nailing that is actually quite low. And so if all of a sudden the rest of your team get all this extra pressure, the best ones leave because they're overworked. And they become independent and like operators, which is what's been happening in the market. And then they become really expensive. And if I just outsource as my alternative, then I lose accuracy and quality and like the timeliness, unless I can invest in a lot of like service delivery to actually make that all work. And so the result is that I'm too scared to grow. And that ultimately ends up with people leaving the industry. Because there's no growth, yet inflation is still a thing. People have personal goals and objectives, financially as well as just like from a satisfaction point of view. And so all of a sudden, accounting doesn't actually look that attractive. Like, why do I want to become a partner? Why do I want to stick this out for 20 years? Well, actually, I've got mates who are in tech, who are in legal, who are in finance, who are making a fortune, and they're getting promoted all the time. And like, And that doesn't exist in accounting. And when you work that backwards, I'm too scared to grow, is that's a major problem in the industry. And our solution is designed to facilitate the transfer of institutional knowledge from your bookkeepers into technology, allowing your bookkeepers to transition from being an operator of a tool to actually being a controller of data, where the AI, the technology, becomes the operator and does most of the work. And that allows you to either run your business with fewer people, and you just retain the best, or more commonly, it allows you to grow first and hire later.
Which makes sense, yeah.
And so this is our opportunity for accounting practices. It's a way to grow, man, because people who have tried to grow, they've hired, and if that scenario that I just explained has played out, which it has on a lot of occasions, people are too scared to grow.
And so you started from an ad tech background before this, right? If I remember correctly.
So what the last startup that I was involved in, we so I founded that in 2019. We figured out how to personalize ads that you generally see in the physical world, even on your phone, but it's contextually connected to where you are physically, without needing to know your name or your email address. Didn't need an app on your phone, didn't need your web history, nothing like that. And it was after spending a really wonderful decade in telco, that I learnt that this is the secret, the only identifier on your phone that doesn't change is your Wi-Fi MAC address. And it never will, because every time you go home, your phone auto connects to Wi-Fi, right? When you go to work, any of your known networks, it auto connects.
Yep.
And so the identifier therefore cannot change, because it needs to be recognized when you walk into a Wi-Fi zone. And because it's the phone that initiates, your phone is permanently pinging through Wi-Fi to go, have you got Wi-Fi for me? Do you know me? Because it's the controller at the other end that makes the decision to let you into the front door or not. Yep. And so when you're a telco and you've got public Wi-Fi infrastructure across the country, and you've got customers with public Wi-Fi infrastructure in their stores and their cafes and all the rest of it, you can learn a lot about someone's likes and behaviors from where they go, where they walk, where they stop. Oh, they walked down a road and then they stopped. Cross-reference that with mapping. Which shop was that? And it starts to infer who you are. Yeah.
No kidding.
But, for that, you need people in the physical world. And we were launching on the 8th of April 2020. And, of course, we all know that COVID happened. So all of a sudden, everyone got locked up and no one was in the physical world. And so we put that one to bed after about 6 months. Where if COVID's still here, this might be a long-term problem.
And so how did you switch from background in telcos and ad tech to Jenesys? That is a very hard left.
Yeah. Part of it is. What I've done a lot of in the past, like in telco, for the first few years, I was in sales teams, and when I was in enterprise and government teams, like we would have RFPs, so requests for proposals. Mm-hmm. Big complex processes, procurement exercises essentially, and so sometimes there would be 25, 30 people on those teams, and I led those teams, and so over a number of years I've put together and led teams of people that changed on a regular basis, and so you learn how to pick good team members, both for their functional expertise or technical expertise, as well as just being a really good fit. And in New Zealand, as we'd say, being a good egg. So good egg. Just working with good people that believe in what you're doing. And so my job is actually to have a vision, to be able to inspire people, and to be able to choose who the people are to bring on that journey. They are all better at me at everything that they do. And so some do a startup and they are the product. And those startups will really struggle to grow beyond the founder. And so, whereas I have a very different view. I'm also in my 40s, and so I've spent 24 years working, and you tend to learn a few things along the way. So I hope that in Jenesys, I hope to build something that will outlast all of us and be based on, giving people an opportunity to create their best work. But everyone knows like why we're doing this, which is to help as many companies as we can not go bust because they cocked up their cash flow. And if we're successful, like the probability is still stacked against us. But if we're successful, like what I want to see is that there are small companies who are hiring people in their local community, and people are doing their houses up. They are taking a holiday. They are supporting a family member. I think that there's a huge transformation of community that takes place when there's really effective local jobs, and then there's some growth. And so I want companies all across the supply chain, all across the world, to be confident that they can grow, because that means more people will be hired, people will be better paid, there's more stability in a company. When cash flow is handled well, there will be fewer restructures in companies where people get fired, because ultimately some companies you can't just help. If they have a product which doesn't actually solve the right problem, then eventually they're going to go bust. There's only so much funding can help you. But otherwise it's usually down to just poor financial admin, poor cost management. And everyone, I won't be too generalistic, but most people in business, if they get into like financial trouble, think that the way to sort that out is to sell their way out of trouble. And it's a bit like in government. Well, if government starts investing in huge amounts of capital projects, like that pumps money into the industry via income tax. And so they're essentially giving themselves a portion of what they were giving out anyway.
Yeah, that's smart.
Okay, and that's right. Like I believe that like growth is needed, but not with ignorance of your costs. And so in politics we call it austerity. And nobody likes that, where you just start cutting. What I believe is that you shouldn't cost cut and not also try and grow. Like you need to be able to do both, but not because it's in reaction to some problem, but you should be doing that every single day. And so
it shouldn't be reactive.
It shouldn't be reactive. It should just be an everyday, like you're being proactive about it. And so people that let their costs get out of control, like don't have a way of effectively managing budgets. Like how's this for irony? You set a budget in your company and a bunch of people have their budgets, and once a month those people generally will be given a management pack and told like, oh, this is what you spent. And if someone overspent on their budget, what are they going to do? Underspend next month? The whole point of a budget was this is committed spend that we have to spend. That's the point of a budget. And so it's very difficult to ever underspend. And so if you continue compounding that over a year, what you get is cost center managers or like business owners and entrepreneurs that just keep spending. They don't actually, and so their financial like admin sort of acumen just goes out of the window. And eventually you have to fire people. Because that's the fastest way of cutting costs. Whereas actually, I think that there is an opportunity to do a better job of day-to-day cost management and avoid those problems. And actually, you'll get a thriving business out of it. The people that you hire are going to believe in you more. That they can go out and buy a house. That they can, put their kids through college or university, without just piling on debt. There's some really transformational ways that communities will benefit and individuals will benefit from, as an accountant, actually having real-time data of what's going on in the business and be able to use it. So it is quite a jump, but it's all about the people and the team of executing.
Yeah. No, I mean, the way you put it, it is an important problem. Did you enter Antler with the idea and the founding team, or you pivoted? Like, how did you form the founding team?
So I came into Antler because two people I knew within 24 hours both told me about their experience in Antler. These two people didn't know that they were talking to me within 24 hours apart, and I didn't go out looking for like validation of, should I enter Antler? I was aware of Antler. They've got an established brand, and I'm inside the startup ecosystem, but I wasn't considering joining. But on the back of those two conversations, I decided to put an application in, and I got in. And I came in with no idea. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And for the first 5 weeks, I sort of just watched, observed, had lots of people pitch, because I was one of the few people, this is my fourth startup I've been involved in, so I was one of the few people that I've both been VC funded in the past and also been in this world, and so it wasn't short of ideas from other people pitching. But I nicknamed the whole experience Love Island for entrepreneurs, and then I became friends with Tosin, who's my co-founder, and we were good mates first, and we connected on a lot of levels, from values through to just ways of just using up free time, etc.
Right.
And it was, between weeks 4 and 5, over that weekend, we talked a little bit about how hard it is to spend company money, and just the concept of bookkeeping, because I was so familiar with it, having done this at university. And I also had always done the books of all the startups I was involved in, so I'm sure they were terrible books. And it was Tosin that realized, and on Monday morning he came in and was like, I've been thinking about this all weekend, and his experience creating technology to validate fake news online. And it's used by a lot of social media companies and governments around the world. And he works with some really successful companies that have done that. And he's like, my experience of structuring unstructured data in real time and using third-party data sources as well as like established sources or internal is frightfully similar to what you're talking about in like the process of someone spending money, and then the output of that needing to be that like accounts or the finance team reconcile it against the bank, against policy, against standards, against legislation, like all those different things that can. And then on top of that, you need to still understand the context of what the hell the company does,
Right.
to be able to do this accurately. And that was the genesis of our idea. And so we called the company Jenesys because it's a word that's so closely associated with like the beginning of things. And AI had not really visited this industry. Like there was not a lot of investment going into accountancy and bookkeeping.
Right.
It's not a sexy subject, and Silicon Valley hadn't got to it yet. And so we wanted to be like the first and like where it all started. And so I hope in 10 years' time that we live up to our name and can point back to, we were like in the first wave and we survived wave 2, 3, and 4. Similar to how the internet happened and, social media companies, and because like we all know the big brands from wave 1 of the internet. So like Amazon, for example, is one of them, eBay, Facebook was wave 2. But anyone who survived the dot-com crash, they were originally in wave 1. PayPal's another one.
Yeah.
And so they're really big respected names that have transformed their industries, their category, and we're going to try and survive and be one of them too.
And you said over the years you've sort of trained this muscle on picking the right people. As you scaled the team from just a co-founding team to how big are you right now?
28.
28. Any insights on how you do that, and what's your experience in picking the right people?
Well, first of all, you got to accept that you won't get it right every time.
Right.
And so when you get it wrong, doesn't mean that you need to like, oh my gosh, revisit, go back to square one, like trying to figure out, oh my gosh, who do I want? One of the benefit that I've noticed since I turned 40, there's so much more in life where I'm like, I just don't really care. It's wonderful.
Right.
I just don't care.
Yep.
And it's quite freeing actually, like not worrying about what someone else thinks or et cetera. And so there's a little bit of that applies to hiring. Like I would never have been able to do what I can do now, like in my 20s or early 30s. I would have. It would have taken me much longer to get over a personal failure of mine for hiring the wrong person, or that I took too long to fire them from the team, and I'm now having to deal with like the resulting fallout within the team. Therefore, I'm not going and finding another person straight away because I'm freaking out because all the team are freaking out, and so there's a huge chain of events. Doesn't mean that you need to hire slowly. You do need to fire fast when you make a mistake, not when you make a mistake.
Right.
But I like to ask, in like a first interview, I like to ask people about, like, tell me about your ideal holiday.
Hmm.
It's interesting to learn what that is.
Right.
But I ask questions because what I'm trying to figure out is, are you someone who like spontaneously goes on holiday and has a flight that turns up and a flight that goes home? Or are they someone who does meticulous research and like details what they're going to do all day, every day, you know, like as two ends of the spectrum? So where does
Right.
someone fall into that spectrum? Because based on the task that I need them to do, sometimes you need people who are incredibly task orientated. It's irrespective of what the job is. Sometimes you just need to be task orientated. You need to naturally write lists to manage your workload. And then other people, if you're too task orientated, you're going to miss the spontaneous opportunities to respond quickly, like in certain types of marketing, branding roles, for example.
Right.
Or if you have an engineer who's too like task orientated, then they're only going to do exactly what they were told. As opposed to sort of think quite broadly and go, well, hang on, that has an effect there and that, so I will just do something different. And so I try and work out how people run their lives, really, from a personal point of view, because everybody brings that to the business, to their work life, and it's irrespective of what you actually need them to do. Don't try and, it's like, they will always have an interview with someone who just validates, like, technically, do they actually know what they're doing?
Right.
If you find someone who exactly matches the profile that you are looking for, of like, I need someone who's going to be, like, I have the most wonderful operations director. And she's had, like, 2 pay rises and promotions since joining, like, only 7 or 8 months ago. Which I probably got wrong. But she was incredibly task-orientated. That's what I need from that operations role. There's a huge amount of stuff going on. And so it didn't really matter. Like, she joined with a really good experience.
Mm-hmm.
But like she didn't have the experience of someone of her in a year's time.
Right.
There's a huge amount that's been gained, but that person has become like one of the most important people in the company, because she's tracks and is on top of like everything across operations that's going on. And I'm not a detailed run my life by a strict calendar. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I am happy to make things up as I go along. If I get asked to speak on stage, I can't do it if I write a speech, like, because I will need to just read it. I can't do, I'd rather just wing it because I know my subject. And I enjoy just spontaneously making things up as I go along. But you also can't fill your business with a bunch of people that are like that, because nothing will ever get done.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was a really long way of just saying, know what type of person you're looking for in their personal life, of like how they plan and go on holiday, and they'll probably unlock a lot of insights.
Right. So approaching it from all facets of their life rather than just their professional experience has helped you.
I usually do an interview without even looking at their CV.
Oh, wow, it might be risky. Yeah. Nice. And so you've been this is what, your fifth startup?
So this is the 4th startup, and I've co-founded 3 of them. Yeah.
And like you said, you've raised money before this one as well. How emotionally taxing has it been, and what helps you keep going?
It's easy to answer what keeps me going. It's the conviction for the destruction that bad cash flow management can bring to a company, and the subsequent loss of jobs. Because we're in AI and we're in bookkeeping, there's a lot of people in the industry who are like really fearful of, oh, AI is just going to take their jobs, and then that's a whole different conversation. Like, what I care about is companies not going bust and people losing their jobs because of that. I think that we can save more jobs than that might get lost to AI going through its transformation right now. I don't think that'll be the same across all industries, but in this one, in accounting and this professional service, I think that's true. The emotions of it, they swing wildly.
Right.
You can, not just day to day, but hour to hour, or like meeting to meeting, you can wildly swing from, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Man, I miss corporate. Through to just utter jubilation of like, this is the greatest feeling ever. I never experienced this in corporate. And I will say, for probably the first 18 months of this journey, I quite often, when I was having a tough time, had to deal with the conflict in my mind of, I really miss corporate right now. But about 6 months ago, that changed. Don't know why. Can't put my finger on it. Might just have been like, well, enough time passed, and I think everyone will experience how long that takes. Like, that might be different. But for me, it was 18 months on this journey, and I know I don't find that on a almost daily basis I suffer from the answer to the negativity that I'm feeling right now is that, oh, I miss corporate. I still get the negativity, but that's not the way that my brain currently goes. It's far more of a fight response, which is my natural response. Like, when people talk about, fight or flight,
Right.
I always fight. Played rugby for a very long time. Like, it was a legal brawl. Like, it was wonderful.
Oh, that's why there's that all black shirt. So you are
Yeah.
a rugby fan. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a signed... so I lived in Wellington, New Zealand for 10 years. Well, Wellington for 7, Auckland for 3. But that jersey I bought at an auction. It's the 2007 Rugby World Cup jersey, signed by the All Blacks that are Wellington-based, that played in that World Cup. So the problem is that I'm a South African who supports South Africa in international rugby, and every now and then when I'm talking to a South African, they see the jersey and they're like, "Hey, explain yourself."
Yeah, it's a small. You are the second rugby player founder I've had this month. That is crazy.
Nice.
And actually, she's also from UK. Maybe I'll
Yeah.
intro you guys.
Yeah, that sounds good.
She used to play for the Swiss rugby team.
Okay, nice.
So yeah, the ups and downs can be, obviously, it can sometimes take time initially. So I've been through multiple ringers as well, 5 startups. I think sometimes just to get the hang of like true belief that what you're solving is important and you can do it takes time.
It does, yeah.
And so you're in your 40s with a kid. How easy or hard has the last 18 months been?
Not as bad as I've heard other stories, I must admit. When Gus is 4, so he was born before we started. I chose to spend the first 8 months of his life co-parenting with my wife Charlotte, and so we did 4 days on, 4 days off, the two of us. Like, when Gus was obviously still feeding overnight as a young baby, and it gave a really incredible bond between him and I. And although they're not, like, when he grows up, he's not going to have memories of being a 6-month-old baby, like, having lots and lots of time with me. Yeah. I do, but there is also, now that he's just past 4, I 100% believe there is an explainable bond that we have, which is because I spent so many months, like, just there the whole time. And that bond is deeper than a memory. It's something that is really, really cool. And for me, I've traded a little bit of sleep, admittedly. And so I always do the mornings, and always have. And so when Gus gets up, somewhere between 6 and 6:30, I wake up, irrespective of whether I just got in from an event and it took me 2 hours to get home at 1 o'clock in the morning, or I went to bed at 10:30 like I should be. Gus wakes up and we do the mornings together, and we have breakfast, and he does some playing. I have to unpack the dishwasher. I hate that job. and I get him to nursery, which means that brushing teeth and getting dressed is also the other entertainment of the morning.
Yeah.
And then it's how quickly do I need to move to get my butt into London or somewhere else, like whatever's going on for the day. And so being able to retain those mornings has become like the time that him and I have. because I'm not always at home in time for dinner, and so we have video calls, and sometimes I also miss bedtime. And it probably is harder on me than it is him, to be honest, missing those. But if I didn't have that commitment in the mornings, then I would feel like a third wheel in our family.
Yeah.
Because the business does demand so much. Yeah. So, well, yeah, it's made it harder, yeah, but it's not. I wouldn't change that. I would do it again. Yeah, it's not that bad. The things that you learn how to negotiate with a child, actually quite useful.
Indeed, yeah. Yeah, I think having some sort of dedicated time and ritual that you consistently go through, even I have experienced that. In my case, it's the opposite. End of the day is when I am more available. So right from dinner to bedtime and all that. And having consistently done that has made a huge difference. And I've been party to the crime where I've been absent. So year 3, I think the last startup took a lot out of me, and I just didn't have the time, and I think I regret deprioritizing a little bit, especially in 2020.
Yeah, amen. That's harsh.
And so you've done this 4 times. Any advice for people who are just starting out, first time founders?
It would probably be never lose your a little bit of arrogance of what you're doing and why, but have the humility to change, to be convinced to change your mind.
Interesting. Yep. Yeah, it's such a contradiction, right? You have to be firm but not firm.
Yeah, don't be dogmatic about it, but hold your conviction really high. Quite often people you don't change your vision. Your vision is where your arrogance needs to sit, but it also needs to stop there. Your strategy and tactics need to be flexible. Your tactics on a daily basis, because your customers might be like, well, actually, I don't really care about that so much, but I care about that thing over there. I'll be like, cool, change tactics to address that. Your strategy is something that your whole team need to be involved in. And if you're going to change strategy, then you need the whole team on that with you. You don't just arbitrarily change strategy on your own and then think that everyone's going to adjust their tactics to follow that. That is where you lose your team.
Right.
Or you just need to stay a solo founder, which is a lot more possible these days with vibe coding and every AI tool under the sun, and no shortage of YouTube videos going, oh, I'm $1 million ARR and I'm one person. You're like, well, that's good for you. But otherwise, your vision is what is held tight, and that's the founders. But make sure you communicate your strategy and any change of strategy, and take your team on the journey. And let them do tactics. As a founder, with the exception of the first few months, the moment you've got more than 3 or 4 people in the team, you need to start handing over the tactics to them.
Yeah, you need
They're probably going to be
enable
better at you, because hopefully that's why you hired them.
We have reached the rapid fire, or the random questions,
All right.
as I call it. What's the most absurd pitch idea you've actually considered building, especially given you've been at Antler?
The most absurd. Yeah. Something that I wanted to call, that I tried to call, can't even remember. Oh, that's embarrassing. But I wanted to rent out privately owned motorhomes and boats, commercially. And it was back when Airbnb, sort of was all the rage. It was 2013, 2014, Airbnb just started to skyrocket. It was the sharing economy. All of a sudden, people were creating marketplaces to share a drill, And I had this harebrained scheme that, motorhomes or RVs, and boats. Basically, because I wanted to be able to pay a very small amount of money and drive someone's $1 million boat.
That's a good one. Yeah, Airbnb for X has been I think it's still a rage. I think there are people who are trying to figure out an Airbnb for X.
Yeah,
that's
I also
interesting.
just now this one I don't think is absurd at all, but that's because I'm very biased. But I love getting into a hot tub, like a jacuzzi hot tub, and we don't have one. But I'm like, I know there are people with them. Can I pay a tenner to get an hour? So we need Airbnb for hot tubs.
Who would win in a cage match? Your current self or your first time founder self?
Current self.
Really? Back in the day when you were playing rugby, no? That guy must be stronger.
Yeah, because experience tells me to let young me run out of energy
Hmm.
and then finish me off. It's you when you're youthful, you come out swinging. Whether it's the number of hours that you do as like a measure of I'm being a founder because I'm working 18 hours a day, I am a hero.
Yeah.
Yeah, you won't be around in 2 years' time, buddy.
That's why investors like cutting check to 25-year-olds.
Yeah, they also like writing checks to second and third time founders too.
You wake up as an Excel spreadsheet. What's in cell A1?
The title.
The title CEO?
Yeah, maybe the date.
Alright. You can only raise your next round with a viral TikTok. What's your video concept?
I have a way of solving loneliness.
How does that apply to Jack?
Who cares?
How are you raising for Jack by a video on loneliness?
Well, because a viral TikTok can't be more than 20 or 30 seconds long. No one cares about this technology. They care about having an emotional reaction. And so if all I have is 20 seconds on TikTok, then I'll talk about something which has got such an emotional connection to most people, especially if it's to do with childhood. And after I get their 20 million, we'll figure out how to make that applicable to bookkeeping.
I have a better pitch for you.
Yeah.
You can actually pitch the get a ride on this $1 million boat.
So there's a company in Germany, they're called Celonis, and they have got very boring technology which they work with enterprises to find where they've double paid invoices. And they're pretty successful. They're one of Europe's fastest growing companies. And I met their CMO recently who came up with this challenge, which is that we will find $10 million worth of like double payments that you've made, or we'll write a check for $100K to a charity of your choice. And Mark Benioff of Salesforce joked at an event that this guy was at that, we know you guys, you're the $10 million guys. And that's part of their story. But it's incredibly powerful. And so we're thinking about a campaign where we'll give you back 3 weeks of your month, or, we'll do X, Y, Z.
Right.
Back to accountants who are so time poor. It was inspirational, but yeah, it's just a fascinating sort of like challenge, and that's such a huge part of like that company's story now, is that they don't talk about the tech. They're just like this challenge. Well, because it makes you think like, well, what if they're right? Then I've lost more than $10 million because of double payments.
Yep.
It's a hugely effective technique, and
I think creative campaigns are hard to do, but pay off very well. If you get it right.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll all look forward to the viral TikTok campaign that you're gonna run. A productivity hack you do secretly hate but pretend to love.
Using Grammarly to correct all my sentences and emails.
You hate it?
Yeah, because I have to spend just as much time as I wrote the email like fixing it up, and so I also despise it because I've obviously made so many mistakes, but according to its agenda, and you start to lose some of the way that you're right, like your authenticity. And at the end of the day, Grammarly is just a bunch of AI, which just like turning to ChatGPT or Claude to like write me the thing that I'm supposed to do.
Yep.
And it doesn't reflect your authenticity. I think if you use AI to like spitball ideas and to brainstorm, and then you go away and you actually write something, I think there's a far greater level of satisfaction that you did that. Because you learnt You went through the process, which is you don't get if you bang out a prompt and then copy paste and use something from ChatGPT as like, oh, this is my work. You're like, well, you ticked the box. You did the thing. But you didn't learn very much. And I think there's a risk of us being lazy and dumb in 15 years' time because we've over-relied on AI just to write what should have been a piece of creativity.
Yeah, that's definitely a real risk. I think one of the things that I am kind of worried about is also on the hiring on that front, especially on the engineering side. Like if people don't know the foundation, how are you? Yeah, I get that. Cool. All right, so that was it. Where can listeners find or follow you? What's the best platform and how can they sign up for Jenesys? And what is the right business that would need Jenesys or Jack?
So find me on LinkedIn. You can see in the corner just below how my name is written. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn of sharing our journey, sharing business updates. So that's the best place to connect with me. Yeah, feel free to send a DM. Go for it. If I don't respond straight away, I will. Jenesys, Jenesys, you can see the spelling as well. .co. You can also just type in like AI bookkeeping into Google and you'll find us. The type of business at the moment, we're ideal for accounting practices who have got tens or hundreds of clients and you are on the hook to do bookkeeping for them and you are at capacity or you don't actually want to hire another person but you've got an opportunity to grow. You've still got clients sort of being referred to you. Or you're an industry business that actually like you don't want to be doing bookkeeping internally. And we have a product called Jack Pod, which is end-to-end bookkeeping from documents all the way through to trial balance. We use our tech, we use Jack ourselves, so we train Jack. But we'll do all of the tasks that Jack can't yet do. Which is, so yeah, if you're a slightly bigger business and you need to decide how your bookkeeping gets done and you don't want to hire AP and AR and bookkeepers internally, then come have a look at Jackpod.
Awesome. Well, on that note, Nicolai, thanks for taking the time. It was a fun chat, and
Thanks,
I
man.
really enjoyed that.
You too. All right. Thanks for having me. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks.
Cheers.
If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast app is. See you in the next episode.